Hey everyone, I'm Jake Tonkel, running for San Jose City Council. I'm here with Sally Lieber. Hello, Sally. How are you? Can you hear me okay? We'll see if we.
Hopefully, I'm hearing you, Jake.
All right, perfect. I'm hearing you. So it looks like we're all set. How are things going? 6 days till election day, huh?
Oh boy, it can't get here soon enough. It's really sort of gotten down to the point in time where everything that needs to be said has been said. And last few people to reach out to, but it's getting there.
Yeah, well, you're a veteran compared to me at this stuff. So how are your nerves doing?
Well,
Calm me down, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
it really occurs to me about campaigning that, oftentimes this is the last great surprise in life when you get to the point in time where, you buy your own birthday presents. Finding out what happens at 8:01 on Tuesday night is a really good moment, and the stakes could not be higher nationally. And I think it's really reflected here locally as well.
Yeah, I think what's kind of been coming out over the last couple days, the reason we're on is um, to talk about campaign finance and money in politics, independent expenditures, how you fight, big money and dirty money in these races. We know that that's a huge problem at the national level, but we're certainly seeing that same mindset really repeated. Um, would you mind explaining for people watching, the situation you're in and what's going on over there?
Well, I think that I've always been controversial with moneyed interests. I definitely have a more progressive orientation, and uh, I feel the need less and less as time goes by to really be obedient to the moneyed interests. And I've been serving on the board of the Clean Money Campaign Action Fund for a number of years now. And I think it's something that I see as really twisting policy, crowding out good policies from the political stage, and just simply catering to those who are in your face and those who have the money to have a lobbyist be in your face is really a problem. And I know that you're seeing that very powerfully in your race. And we had just three mailers that were coming from the Silicon Valley organization, we've all heard about in the news today, and funded by the California Apartment Association and California Realtors, that were equating me with Donald Trump, which is not the record that I have. And I think it's really a loss for our politics, because when we can't have interests go out simply as what they are and be honest about their viewpoints, I think that we've really lost something.
Yeah, I mean, there is actually, well, I will frame it from your, expertise. What legal requirement is there for them to tell the truth in any of these engagements in political activity and political discourse?
Well, thankfully, we have a local disclose act here. And so it wasn't just the SVO that was listed, they had to list the top funders.
Hmm.
And we are having issues with that in Mountain View where other mailings haven't been listing the top funders, but that's going to get shaken out of the system, I think. Um, but absent that, there's no way for the voters to know, especially in this year with COVID, with the necessity of schooling at home and everything else that people go through. People don't have time to go on the Secretary of State's website and dig down through multiple layers and look for that information. And so it's something that needs to be sunshined. And I was very happy to see the Mercury News come out about this today. because we have to have institutional power be willing to speak to the abuse of institutional power.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm, excited at what they were able to report, today. I also had issues with what they reported over the last weekend, where Mercury News spent, an article that made it seem like to the public that this is balanced on both sides, that both sides are telling little white lies, and voters should just not necessarily pay too much attention to it. Which, while that message to voters might be, the best takeaway, we're certainly seeing how one-sided this is, particularly in the San Jose City Council races, but in general, big money interests play very differently than some of the smaller independent expenditures that come out in different campaigns and different races. So I think that's something important for us to highlight too, is we still have to follow the money, because there might be, disinformation campaigns on both sides, but they're generally not as balanced. And I think it's really important for us to make sure that that's well known. The other piece I was going to say, I'm sure for yours as well, there's a little check the facts, where not only does it list who paid for it and what the underlying organizations were to that, but they'll put little, asterisks or footnotes next to the things that are facts, or get my air quotes in the screen, facts, and then list things that are irrelevant to the race. For my example, they list websites that aren't mine, or policy that I've never talked about. And then I had a friend who's in San Diego tell me that he got two different mailers, one telling Republican households that the person was a Democrat, and then one telling Democratic households that the person was a Republican, and basically tried to mess with voters all over the place. We're seeing a lot of negativity and a lot of manipulation coming out.
Yeah, and I think, it's obvious that these interests have done the polling. They know who the swings are. They know who the voters are who are likely to opt out if they get faced with a barrage of cynical information. And so it's very manipulative of the process, and it's undemocratic. Because when they do the polling, and you see that there's a mailer that is addressed to the woman in the household, or to the man in the household, or what have you, and it's oriented towards them, and many times it's a message that is contrary to their interests, and so
Mhm.
it's very cynical, and it damages the process for sure.
Absolutely. So I want to spin this and talk about the positives. For you on Mountain View City Council, uh, what are the steps that you might be able to take to hope help address this locally? What should we look? Pardon me. What should we be? It's been a long day of interviews at this point. Um, what should we be looking at a state level? And then I know there's some handcuffs we have at the national level in terms of money in politics. Do you mind going through all three of those things for people really quick, and start to lay some groundwork and where we might be able to improve on?
Yeah, it's been hard here in Mountain View because we lost our hometown newspaper. It's still online, but we lost the home delivery of it, and that and the boxes were a real primary source of information for people about what's going on in town. So that's made things difficult. One thing that I would like to see is really putting the information about independent expenditures in a very prominent place on the city's website. And, putting that front and center so that people don't have to dig down to the sixth layer of the website to get at that. Um, and then I'd like to see more accountability among local elected officials to call this out. We had one of our council members said, "Well, I think independent expenditures are great so long as they're positive." And when they're positive, but I got one mailer for one candidate that was talking about this person is right for our community, and it was coming from a landlord group in Chicago. So, are they talking about Chicago or among landlords or about Mountain View? So, I think that there's work to do there. There is always more work in terms of disclosure and access to the information at the state level. And one thing that I would really like to see taken on at the state level is to base it not so much on, um, and this is in our thinking as activists, not so much on this person made a decision about the XYZ corporation and then they got a contribution from the XYZ corporation, but looking at it as lobbyist based, because lobbyists now are overwhelmingly contract lobbyists with many clients. And so if a member of the legislature does a favor for one of their clients, they won't just be blunt and give them a check from that entity. It'll come from another client of the same lobbyist. And so looking for ways to tease out that data dynamically, I think is really, really important. And then the big kill is getting rid of Citizens United at the federal level. And that's, something that will probably be many years long project, but it's worth it.
Yeah, a lot of different steps to take. The educational piece that you touched on is also really important. And one of the things we've been seeing over the last couple hours for the Silicon Valley organization is that organizations that are members are now stepping away, which is absolutely a good thing. But it's also allowed them in the past to hide their affiliation. That people think about the SVO and they don't think about the member orgs that are a part of it when they see nasty things come out, or negative or positive mailers in each way. Our campaign finance team was digging through 496 forms for independent expenditures, 460 forms for entire PAC funding. And you can see the money changes hands from one PAC to another, which makes it really hard for the community to follow. And so for these kind of instances where we do finally break into the news about how detrimental money in politics is and how detrimental to public trust in our election processes these misleading and often outright false accusations and expenditures are, we have to go and teach people every time this comes through. So grateful that I could pull you on to this, because it is important that as we go forward into these next 6 days, odds are these things won't stop. I know my boss, his two girls were watching a dinosaur cartoon on YouTube, and they got a negative ad about me just this morning. So it's going to continue to happen, but the big piece of it is, how do we make everyone aware? I would love to see, this is me, shouting policy out into the universe, seeing if it happens, not only who paid for it and what the organization spent on it, but also maybe at the very top that says, warning, this information may not be true or accurate. Like just something that says, hey, don't really believe this. Go do your own homework, and kind of force that on the community's level of visualization. Because while they may continue to cite websites that bounce to other websites that reference other websites, spend money to go from one organization to another, what they're really trying to do is just kind of subliminal messaging, get an ugly message in front of somebody enough times that's not necessarily going to have the time to engage. And that's my final question. I would love for you to kind of talk about the community engagement process, getting people more acutely aware of local politics. Is something I also think we're in a really fortunate spot to go through following the death of George Floyd, and increased pressure from the movement for Black Lives on local cities for their policy and their leadership. how do we go about making sure that the policy we're putting in place as local legislators make it easier for people to engage in the political process and learn more about this?
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of it is local elected officials and people who represent local interest groups. Their presence on social media is increasingly scrutinized, which I think is a great thing. There's been a lot of accountability that's come out as a part of that. And the thing that we didn't talk about are the astroturf routes, and that's something that we have to have more sunshine on, um, as well. But I
For people, can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, these are the groups that can say we are people for a better San Jose. I don't know if that's an actual name of a group. Hopefully not. I'm just using it as an example. But then you go to their site and you see that there are about 15 people that work there, and they're all in their 30s or 40s, and that the group is actually supported by a large number of very successful developers, um, corporations that develop on a large scale. And increasingly, those astroturf roots groups are portraying themselves as a bona fide part of the community. And I think it's something that needs to really be scrutinized. And I do think that the Silicon Valley organization reckoning is a really important moment. And to my mind, the photograph that they put up was heinous. The use of it was heinous. It was a legitimate journalistic photograph, but the way that they used it was disgusting. But what's worse are the policies that they've pushed behind it, and that's what really needs to be taken on. And maybe there's a role for local government to be cataloging the actions of these entities that are the repeat players in municipal elections. And in the same way that you can go back on Facebook and look at the ad center of a candidate and see all the ads that
Mhm.
that person has placed over time, we might want to have something like that at the city level that doesn't discourage anyone's free speech, but it makes people better information consumers. And again, it has to dig down several layers at a minimum, at least, to look at the actual true funders.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I know I'm going to call out Sebastian Wong, who has been working on a Medium article. The link is in the comments, so you can definitely click it if you're watching, since I don't think anyone's going to type in medium.com/EJBW, etc. But he's been keeping track of which organizations have been funding attacks through the Silicon Valley organization, through South Bay Labor Council, through the SJPOA, et cetera, because the money is a big piece of it. And then I know there are folks that are tracking as well how many political mailers come out and who funds them and why, and putting those in their own kind of private catalogs to get awareness out there. But having it through the city of San Jose, having it through the city of Mountain View, making it obvious, one of the first things people can see as they go for elections information would be a big step. So
Yeah, definitely. And I think putting out the overall dollar figure that entities have spent, we're getting better at that at the state level. So knowing that I think it's north of $30 million that Uber and Lyft have put into one proposition. Um, and it's really important that as information consumers, we're able to access that information really quickly.
yeah, and so the last question: how do we start to build trust again? I mean, whether it's Silicon Valley organization or elected officials, how do we build trust with our community that the electoral process is safe and you can talk to candidates, find out their ideas, that sort of thing? I know the national discourse has certainly divided our country, where people don't think they can trust the other side or even the media. What are some steps that we could take?
Yeah, I think that it's been a really good process from my perspective with SVO, and you know, really sunshining it and saying, is that the kind of community that we want to have? That's critically important. I think we should look at the entities that quote unquote give to both sides,
Hmm.
because they're simply adding to the arms race of money in politics. And I think that we have a great opportunity through the social media to apply peer pressure to people. And I think that ultimately that kind of information is the best approach. And also public financing of campaigns. We got very close with Prop 15 a few years ago to removing the provision in the California Constitution that bans all public financing of campaigns. And I think that we should look at some opportunities to do that. Um, there are some very compelling cases, like the race for the state insurance commissioner should not be funded by the insurance industry, and we should really look at the public benefit of those things. And I do believe that there should be a tax on lobbying, um, and that goes to help fund public interest information and campaigns.
Both great ideas. Thank you again, Sally. Um, I know you're busy. All the candidates are busy with 6 days left, but I appreciate you making the time to come on and talk to people about this, especially as it's kind of blowing up right now in our community.
Yeah.
Thank you. Um,
Well, best of luck on Tuesday, and you've been running a
Same to you.
campaign and inspiring a lot of people, including me. So thank you so much, Jake. I
Thank you, Sally. I appreciate that. All right.
appreciate
Have
it.
a great night.